Okay, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new, welcome. We're going to talk about the astrology of this Scorpio full moon today. And I want to kind of build in some of the context of what I think is going on. I think we're going through a transition in our inner psychological structure. We talked last time about how Neptune and Saturn culminated pattern uh, uh, of going through a cycle and ending in Pisces. And I think that dissolved some of the old structures that were, in place that kept us in some protective strategies in our inner family systems. And as it moved into a new phase in Aries, I think this is a transition that we're going through that has taken place and we're in the beginning phases of this, and it's like I'm starting to figure it as the discovery process. And this kind of throws our part systems into a bit of a free for all, because while there are parts that have maybe been freed from jobs that they've felt forced into doing and are now choosing to do different, I think that we also have parts that have been in roles for a long time and they're not quite on board with moving forward and changing. They're seeking comfort. So let's share this chart and get into it, and we can we can discuss a little bit more here. So this full moon is in Scorpio. And what I want to point out is the new moon was at 27 degrees in Aries. And because it was in late degrees, it progressed into the next sign. So the sun is in Taurus, and the full moon is in Scorpio. And I think that's significant. We're in a pattern of what I would call shifted full moons, because when the new moon happens in a late degree of a sign, the full moon ends up happening in a degree that is kind of uh, progressed a little bit. And this happens in waves, and it comes and goes. The last one was in 2023. We're in the midst of one now, and it's going to be going for a while. But uh, what I notice and is you've got a new moon, and the full moon is kind of in an inconjunct, a natural inconjunct, not by degree, but by natural sign. And so I feel like we're in this process of a changing of the leadership of our inner family, our inner psychological structures. And that can require some internal adjustments. When something changes, there's always, a little bit of an adjustment period, and it can be uncomfortable. And I think that I want to talk a little bit about parts work and it how it kind of goes when you find and start working with a part. uh, if they sense an agenda, they're going to pull back, and you're probably not going to make much progress because nobody wants to be manipulated. And so when you work with a part, like there's typically a fairly set structure that it goes through. You find the part, you understand that it's been doing a job that it felt forced into, some kind of a protection strategy that it was afraid if it didn't do that, it was, something bad would happen. based on some kind of a traumatic situation that we weren't able to emotionally integrate. As Jeffrey Wolf Green says, evolution happens through the emotional body, and as we progress, if we're seeing through just logic and thinking, until we can process that emotionally, we're not going to make it doesn't really set into place. And the part that I want to talk about here is with the full moon in Scorpio, that can feel pretty intense. Every cycle, I feel the intensity of it before it moves into Sag, and it's something that is kind of a signature thing. This full moon is in the second decan of Scorpio, and that is ruled by the sun. And I don't normally talk about the decans. I don't know if that's something that I'll be doing on here, but I found it fascinating, ruled by the sun, because this new moon was in the late degrees of Aries. We're trying to shift the leadership of our inner family systems and bring something into reality that is something that we've dreamed of, that we really want to, we really want to move forward and we want to make this happen. And I think that this time is calling for us to take action on this. And we need to be able to reconcile and bring some self energy to this so that we can move forward and everybody in the system feels heard and seen. A good leader is one that is able to take in the account the needs of all. And in parts work, they talk about, if it isn't good for one, it's not good for all. And I think that can be a little deceiving. You might have parts that are confused because we've relieved some of the parts that were doing these jobs that were protection strategies that dissolved while Neptune and Saturn were culminating into each other in Pisces, all that dissolution. And I think another thing that's super important to understand is not all this goes on the conscious level. Like there are some things that happen consciously. Like I think a lot of people are super aware of their inner critic parts and parts that are critical of themselves, parts that want to shut down. We could have done this better. We could have done it, perfectly. We didn't do it right. And that can really throw a wrench in the spokes. But there are parts in the system that are deep enough that we're not really consciously aware of them. There are pre-verbal parts, and I want to bring some of this into it this time. I think that with this new phase of Saturn to Neptune, we're called to take responsibility for some of this and to really take our time with it and not try to jump too fast. We talked a lot about the urgency and trying to be able to sit with some presence before we act in a reactive way or an urgent way. And I still think that is super important. And it's going to be something that we're really going to have to be on guard about. But we want to really be careful about how we react to this or what we do about it. This Mars in new phase to Saturn, last time we talked at the new moon, they were culminating into Saturn. And one of the ways that I've seen part systems work is when we're trying to move forward and something happens that is a little bit out of the norm, we have parts that object, they don't want to go. There are neural pathways that are well-worn trails that are comfortable to walk on. It's like an older pair of shoes. They're comfortable and they feel like ours. And when we change something and buy a new pair of shoes, they're not comfortable, but we just need to walk in them enough to break them in. And then they do feel like ours and they start to feel better. But as you go through that transition period, uh, there can be parts of us that are really resistant to step out of the comfort of something that's worked for a long time. Because with Saturn, we kind of get this rule system that works. It's not a part per se, but there are communities kind of come up with these rules within their culture. And based on that culture, the whole system just knows you don't move in that way because it's not accepted and will be rejected. One of the base functions of a biological brain system is to make sure that we're not uh, rejected by the tribe, because in the past, as we've evolved as a species, our animal instinct is that exile from the tribe is not survival. And so a deep survival strategy is to make sure that we're accepted by the tribe. So some of these new ways that we want to move forward and take action in the world couldn't be met by resistance. And that brings me back to this Scorpio full moon. But what I found fascinated is with it happening in the second decan, and like I said, I don't know that we'll be talking a lot about that, but this ruled by the sun brings in a level of creativity. And this new discovery, I think, with some of the resistance, we can lose sight of that creative spark, that that heartfelt uh, desire to move in a direction. Sometimes we get hooked on something and we are really drawn to it and we really want to move forward. And that's the motivating factor. But when we have parts that come up and resist that, um, I find it interesting. Like if you have ever, worked in a place where they've been doing things for a long time. If you're like me, I've got a lot of Sag energy and I like to look at the big picture, sometimes to my detriment, and I miss some of the details. But I've learned that if you look at the big picture to see where you're going and then backfeed the details in as you go along, it can really, move the needle quicker, rather than if I start with the details, I get stuck on one or the other because I'm not keeping that big picture in mind. And so when you might offer change and say, well, we could do something differently and that would benefit everybody, like it would do this, but you get pushback. You'll hear comments like, we have always done it this way. We've always done it this way. Why would we change? Well, it's not comfortable. And it's hard to get some parts to see the benefit of moving in a new way when they've been safe, they've been comfortable. That brings me to Jupiter here. We're building a square from Mars into Jupiter, and Jupiter in Cancer is going to emphasize or make it feel really big when there isn't enough safety in the system. And that's what a lot of this parts work is about, is building safety so that the parts feel comfortable coming forward, being seen, to allow you to understand and communicate what their needs are. And and I think that as we move through this, there's going to be some discomfort. The moon also just recently squared Pluto, and that's going to be some discomfort involved. And we're going to need to let go of some of the resistance to moving beyond some of the protection strategies that we've used in the past, and because they've been comfortable. But the fact is, if we go back to this, it's not getting us what we want. And what we want is to bring some of these dreams into reality and create a new leadership strategy within our system that's more aligned with self-led. And now that brings me to another thing that I want to talk about, which is what exactly is self-led? The good leaders, in my opinion, are able to allow their team and to operate on their own and to find their niche and the way that they prefer to move forward and the way that what they're passionate about and what they want to do. And what happens in a part system is these parts feel like they get trapped in a job they don't want to do because of the fear of something bad that happened. We've talked about that. But when you can unburden that part and build enough trust that he realizes or she, this part realizes that they don't need to do that job anymore, they can do whatever they want. And that to me is super important. A good leader can allow them to do what they want, and this is what I think is throwing a wrench in this full moon system and what is required this new adjustment. We've got Mercury in a new phase to Mars, and I think that it's bringing lessons that it learned while it was in retrograde in Pisces. And I think that a lot of this goes on under the surface. We're not privy to all of the negotiations when new rules are created in the system. And I think that our responsibility comes when we feel that resistance. We feel that the resistance to moving forward, to take that time to listen. This Venus in Gemini squaring the nodes, I feel is super important, and it just went new phase with Uranus at the final degrees of Taurus, and then they moved into Gemini together, and they're doing it right with Sedna. And Sedna to me is kind of this shamanic energy that is kind of a soul retrieval mechanism. It's a super deep asteroid. I'm going to make a video about this, and I'll put the link in the comments so you guys can look at that. It's a separate mythological read, a psychological read on the mythology of Sedna. And I find it super fascinating. It's one of the things that I'm super passionate about, one of the jobs I want to do. But to get back to this, like, if we can listen to the needs of these parts and come up with ways to align and build enough safety into the system so that we can allow these parts to do new jobs and move forward, then we can consciously take action and accomplish something more that we may not even really understand what is fully coming online yet. Because it's so new, I still think we're super early in the birthing process. Like this is a new birth. This Saturn Neptune new phase conjunction happened at 0 degrees Aries, and I don't think we quite fully understand what this child is capable of. Children develop and grow, and we're going to sit here and watch this, and like with discovery and curiosity and the grace of allowing this child to become what it is and let it fully develop. Good leadership kind of guides the system and turns it when it needs to. We don't want to be so in trying to control things, this Virgo South Node, that we lose sight of surrendering to the grace of being guided to do something that we may not know exactly what it is yet. And I think that Uranus moving into Gemini in trine with Pluto is going to be showing us we're going to start to get flashes of insight into what's coming. And it may lead us down a rabbit hole that we might not fully understand what it's about yet. But we do have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. And so we're moving forward, but with the understanding that it may change in the future. And so I think that I want to talk about how Pluto is going to square, or Mercury, uh, better said, is going to square Pluto. And it's going to go through a crescent phase, which is some insecurity. The best way that I love to describe this crescent phase is my wife grows tomato plants in the greenhouse, and she puts this fan on them so that it makes them shake, and they really root down in and get strong before they start to grow up towards the light. And I think that right now we need to root into uh, what's going on within the system so that as we move forward, we can bring everybody along with us. And but I also think that we need to trust in the fact that the stuff that's going on under the scenes is happening for our benefit. It's happening for us, not to us. And so as these difficulties come up, looking at them with curiosity can help us to create that safety in the system. Oftentimes, when we meet resistance, our instinct is to jam that down and use that Mars distorted masculine energy to force our way through and ignore those parts of us that are putting up a red flag and saying, "Hey, like I don't think we should do this yet." Well, what if we sat with them and understood their needs enough so that we can build enough safety in so that they can see the benefit of the bigger picture? They're the ones that are saying we've always done it this way. The rug has kind of been pulled out from underneath them, and all of a sudden they're feeling lost and alone. And so rather than pushing them down and neglecting them and not listening, we need to sit with them, put our arms around them and say, what do you need to feel safe? What would make you feel safe moving forward in this way? And oftentimes, I think there's a lot of intelligence that comes from, this, because if we do sit long enough to really let that log jam clear and start to let things flow again, then we find that it was for a really good reason. And some of the stuff that we may discover when this happens can be something that kind of changes how we move forward. I think this new phase that we're in is so new that we don't know exactly what it's about. And by moving forward, we're going to find new things that come to light, which kind of alters the direction. But our job right now is to move forward and take responsibility for being able to be present with the urgency, to be present with the resistance. And I think that finding our own needs, finding the needs of the parts, allowing that communication to happen. There's one last thing I want to talk about too, is sometimes the communication that we get from parts is it's not audible. Like it's not just something that, oh, you're sitting down and having a conversation with somebody. It oftentimes comes through in pictures or symbols. Sometimes my parts talk to me by all of a sudden I'll be hearing a song, a melody of a song that I haven't heard in a long time, or even if it is something that I've heard recently, if I'm curious about that and I go look up the lyrics of it, I'm shocked at like, oh wow, this part is trying to tell me something, and these lyrics have made it clear. Or if I think about the symbol or something, some picture that pops into my mind, it is oftentimes these parts trying to say something. Sometimes our parts are pre-verbal. They're young enough that they didn't have language to speak, and that's the best way that they can communicate. And I just find a lot of value in taking the time to look at the symbolism of my dreams and journal about it, and let it develop and blossom out. And I think it's surprising sometimes how this stuff comes forward. So I think that's what I've got for you this time. I think it's important to understand that this is a fixed full moon in a fixed sign, and the sun's in a fixed sign, and sometimes that can take work or enough patience and grace for the parts within us to see the value in moving towards this big picture that may feel foreign. When you talk about the brain and the plasticity, um, neuroplasticity. Sorry, I'm trying to find my words here. They building a new pathway in the brain is hard, and it feels foreign. We're back to these new shoes. You know, sometimes it takes a while to move through the new shoe process to where they feel comfortable and it's something you want to wear. And then, you know, sometimes shoes can be so comfortable that we don't want to get rid of them, and yet they're full of holes and they start to affect how the arches in our feet are, and we need to get rid of them. So, for our own good, we have to go through that change of moving through breaking in a new pair of shoes, and I think that's what's going on here. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll move forward. Look for the link to this video about Sedna. I think that is super fascinating. That Uranus and Venus went in a conjunction while they were culminating. Uranus is going to culminate into Sedna and then move into a new phase over the next month, and I think that's fascinating. Um, so we can talk more about that as we go forward. And as always, if you have questions, put them in the comments, and we'll talk about this. And I look forward to moving forward with you guys and continuing our journey. It keeps expanding as I move forward and think. And what does this new moon mean to me? What is this coming up? It's not always quite so obvious right at the beginning, and you know it changes as we move. So anyway, thanks you guys, and we'll see you next time.